Tonight, you're not a queen, a knight, or a noble lord. You're a medieval servant girl, waking before dawn on a freezing stone floor, carrying heavy buckets through mud, breathing smoke-filled air, and surviving on scraps while the castle sleeps warmly above you. Behind the grand feasts and candlelit halls of the Middle Ages was a far darker reality, one built on exhaustion, hunger, fear, and invisible labour, and honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a single winter here. So before we step into the cold kitchens, muddy courtyards, and shadowy servant halls of medieval life, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy these quiet historical journeys. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's step back into the dark reality of being a medieval servant girl. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the crooked shadow of a manor house long before dawn, your boots already soaked through with mud that smells faintly of wet straw and horse dung. Frost clings to the wooden palisade beyond the yard, and smoke curls lazily from the hall roof where soot-black rafters trap the heat like a jealous secret. Somewhere in the darkness, monastery bells ring the hour in slow, hollow notes, though no one nearby seems rested enough to care. A stable horse snorts steam into the winter air beside you, and the wind carries the sour scent of old ale, damp wool, and extinguished tallow candles. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You clutch your rough wool cloak tighter around your shoulders while servants hurry past with lowered heads, each moving as though the cold itself might report them for laziness. You probably would not last a week out here, honestly. Your hands already ache, and the day has not even begun. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in tonight, feel free to comment your location and local time. Somewhere out there, another tired soul is probably listening beneath rain, wind, or midnight, quiet just like this. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The manor sleeps lightly around you, never fully silent, never fully warm. Even now, in the hour before dawn, you hear the scrape of a ladle somewhere below stairs and the muffled cough of a servant girl curled beside the kitchen wall. The lord and lady sleep behind oak doors thick enough to keep out draughts and unpleasant realities alike, but the lower household rests wherever space allows beside the dying hearth, beneath benches, against sacks of barley, or among heaps of rushes spread across the stone floor. You belong among them. The rushes beneath your feet are old and damp, mixed with herbs meant to sweeten the hall months ago. Some swear that lavender keeps sickness away. Others insist rosemary frightens wandering spirits. Judging by the smell rising from the floor, neither herb has won the battle entirely. A bell rings once from the courtyard. Not the monastery bell this time. This one belongs to the steward. Immediately the hall stirs. Blankets shift. Someone groans. A boy mutters a prayer to St. Dunstan, patron of workers and blacksmiths alike, though perhaps mostly patron of exhausted people at this hour, beside you. A servant girl named Agnes rubs sleep from her eyes with cracked fingers before pulling her wool hood over tangled hair. No frost indoors, she whispers with a tired sort of pride. That means the roof still works. You glance upward at the rafters where smoke gathers in grey clouds thick enough to sting the eyes. A generous definition of works. Agnes snorts softly, then rises from the rushes with the stiffness of an old woman despite being perhaps 16. No one can quite agree whether she is younger or older, because hard labour wears years onto faces faster than calendars do. In the manor, age belongs mostly to nobles. Servants simply become tired. You follow her toward the kitchen passage where the stone floor bites cold through worn shoes. Every servant moves carefully here, not from politeness but from fear of waking the steward in a foul mood. The steward is a narrow man with a beard like wire wool and a habit of jingling iron keys whenever displeased, which is often. The kitchen already glows with the red pulse of banked coals. Heat brushes your face in uneven waves while two kitchen maids kneel beside the hearth blowing sparks back to life through hollow reeds. Ash swirls upward around them like grey snow. One of the girls nods toward a bucket. River water first. Of course it is. Every medieval morning eventually becomes about carrying water. Entire civilizations, you realize, are essentially elaborate systems designed to force tired people into lifting heavy buckets before sunrise. You step outside again with Agnes and two sleepy boys from the stable. Dawn still hides somewhere beyond the eastern hills, leaving the world silver blue beneath a low ceiling of clouds. The path toward the river has frozen unevenly during the night, and your boots slip in ruts hardened like stone. The stable dog follows close behind. He is small, muddy, and shaped vaguely like a loaf of bread someone accidentally gave teeth. No one claims ownership of him. He simply appears wherever food or sympathy might exist. Agnes tosses him a scrap of coarse bread from her sleeve. "Don't feed him," one of the boys mutters. "He'll never leave." "He already lives here," Agnes replies. The boy considers this carefully, then shrugs as though medieval philosophy has once again defeated him. The river lies beyond a stand of bare alder trees where mist curls low across black water. Thin ice clings to the edges, cracking softly as buckets dip beneath the surface. Your fingers burn instantly from the cold. Some swear river water before sunrise cures fevers better than monastery herbs. Others believe spirits drift above rivers in winter, searching for careless souls. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the pale shapes moving through the mist are merely birds or something older lingering near the banks. You decide not to investigate. A wise medieval survival strategy, you discover, is avoiding anything described as possibly cursed. The buckets grow heavier during the walk back. By the time the manor gates reappear through morning fog, your shoulders ache sharply enough to make you understand why servants often walk hunched before reaching 30. Inside the kitchen, the household awakens in layers. First come the bakers, dusted white with flour like restless ghosts. Then the brewer's assistants smell impermanently of stale ale. Then scullions carrying stacks of greasy trenchers scraped from yesterday's feast. The air fills with smoke, damp wool, yeast, onions, and human exhaustion. A cook named Marjorie rules over it all like a battle commander. She stands broad and red-faced beside the hearth, stirring oat pottage in an iron pot large enough to baptize a sheep. Beeswax candles flicker around her while steam clouds the low ceiling. "You," she says, pointing directly at you with a wooden spoon. More water, then turn the spits. No greeting, no kindness, but also no striking, which apparently counts as a promising start. You obey quickly. The spit handles feel greasy beneath your palms as strips of salted meat rotate slowly above the flames. Fat hisses into the fire, somewhere behind you. Agnes scrubs wooden bowls using sand because soap remains expensive and, frankly, medieval cleaning standards have a deeply optimistic relationship with reality. The morning stretches onward in smoke and heat. Outside, pale dawn finally creeps across the manor yard. Men lead oxen toward frozen fields. A cartwheel squeals somewhere beyond the gatehouse. Monastery bells ring again in the distance, marking an hour that none of the servants have time to count properly. And still the work continues. Because this is the hidden truth of being a medieval servant girl, the day begins long before sunrise. and if you do your work perfectly, most people upstairs will never notice you existed at all. The smell of smoke settles into your hair before the sun properly rises, and by the time the first pale stripe of morning reaches the manor yard, your hands already feel roughened by heat, water, and ash. The kitchen breathes around you like some great animal waking slowly from sleep. Coals crackle beneath iron pots. Steam drifts upward towards soot-black rafters where strings of onions, garlic, and drying herbs sway faintly in the warmth. Marjorie the cook believes kitchens possess moods. If the fire burns badly, she mutters while tossing dried rosemary into the flames, someone nearby has lied recently. No one argues with her, partly because she controls the food, and partly because she once chased a drunken stable hand across the yard with a carving knife. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the knife was truly raised, or whether the stable hand simply ran faster after too much ale. But either way, the story has become useful. You stand beside the long preparation table scraping hardened grease from wooden trenchers. The grease clings stubbornly in the grooves like it has signed a legal agreement with the wood beside you. Agnes kneads coarse barley dough with slow, practiced movements, while one of the younger kitchen boys turns the spits with the solemn expression of a monk illuminating scripture. It is difficult work pretending roasted turnips require spiritual concentration. Still, nobody complains openly. Complaining travels upward in manor houses, punishments travel downward. Marjorie thrusts another bucket toward you. Pump water this time. The river's for drinking. You blink. There is a pump. Apparently there is. Though pump may be an ambitious word for a wheezing wooden contraption in the rear courtyard that sounds as though it regrets every moment of its existence. You work the iron handle while icy water coughs upward into the bucket in muddy bursts. The stable dog watches nearby with profound suspicion, as though the pump might attack without warning. Honestly, fair enough. Morning light slowly spreads across the manor grounds now, revealing patched roofs silvered with frost and narrow windows leaking smoke into the pale sky. Servants hurry between buildings carrying wood bundles, sacks of oats, baskets of leeks, and armfuls of damp laundry already stiffening in the cold. The entire household moves according to rhythms older than memory itself: bells, meals, prayers, labour, sleep. Even the birds seem tired. You return to the kitchen where heat wraps around you immediately. The difference feels shocking after the courtyard cold. Your cheeks sting while your cloak begins releasing thin curls of steam. Near the hearth, an older servant named Edith sorts dried herbs into little cloth bundles tied with string. Her fingers move carefully despite swollen knuckles. "For coughs," she says, noticing your glance. "Thyme and horehound." She lifts another bundle. "For bad stomachs, mint and fennel." Then another. "And this one keeps away nightmares." You peer closer. "That's just garlic." Edith nods seriously. "Nightmares hate the smell." A perfectly reasonable medieval conclusion. No one can quite agree whether folk remedies truly work or merely comfort frightened people during long winters. Still, in a world where sickness arrives quickly and physicians rarely visit servants, even garlic begins to seem reassuring. Marjorie slams a ladle against the iron pot. "Bowl's ready." Breakfast for the lower household begins as thick oat pottage spooned into rough wooden bowls alongside coarse bread hard enough to qualify as building material. Ale appears too, though weak enough that even children drink it safely. The water inside manor walls cannot always be trusted, especially during warm months when wells turn foul and sickness spreads faster than gossip. You eat standing near the hearth because chairs belong mostly to important people. The pottage tastes smoky and bland. but warmth matters more than flavour now. Across the room, Agnes cradles her bowl close to her chest as though guarding treasure. "You learn quickly," she says between bites. "About what?" Keeping near the kitchen, you glance toward the roaring fire. "That obvious." She nods once. In winter, everyone wants kitchen work. Laundry freezes, stable floors freeze, the privy. She pauses thoughtfully. Actually, don't think about the privy. Too late. You think about it immediately. Medieval life contains many experiences best left undescribed before sleep. A sudden burst of laughter erupts near the doorway where two scullions wrestle over the last onion scrap floating in a broth pot. Marjorie breaks the argument by throwing a wooden spoon at both of them with terrifying accuracy. Peace returns instantly. Outside the narrow kitchen windows, the manor fully awakens. Hooves clatter through the yard. Merchants argue near the gate over tolls and unloading fees. Somewhere above stairs, noble voices drift faintly through timber floors, while servants hurry carrying warmed water for washing hands and faces. Not bathing fully, of course. That would be suspiciously luxurious. Some swear too much bathing weakens the body by opening pores to sickness. Others insist hot water invites fevers directly into the blood. Even now, it is hard to tell whether these beliefs exist from genuine fear or simply because heating enough water for regular bath sounds exhausting. Probably both. Marjorie sends you upstairs carrying fresh trenchers and a jug of warmed ale. The staircase curves steeply beside cold stone walls slick with centuries of smoke. Rushes crunch beneath your boots as you enter the great hall once more. It looks entirely different by daylight. Long tables stretch beneath hanging banners faded by years of smoke and winter damp. Sunlight pushes weakly through narrow windows, catching dust motes drifting lazily above the rush-covered floor. At the far end rises the Lord's table upon its dais, elevated just enough to remind everyone else exactly where they belong. Hierarchy, you realize, is medieval people's favourite decoration. A servant girl crossing the hall keeps her eyes lowered so carefully you almost fail to notice the bruise darkening her wrist. She vanishes through another doorway before you can speak. No one mentions such things openly here. The steward appears suddenly near the dais, iron keys clinking at his belt like warning bells. His sharp eyes sweep across the hall before landing briefly on you. You're late. You nearly protest, though you know perfectly well you are not. The trick, Agnes explained earlier, is that servants are always late whenever someone important feels annoyed. Sorry, yes, Master Steward. He grunts, apparently satisfied by submission alone, then stalks away trailing the smell of cold wool and parchment ink. You exhale slowly. Above stairs, life moves quietly but heavily. Noble women whisper beside shuttered windows. Firewood cracks inside private chambers. Somewhere distant, a lute practices the same 3 notes repeatedly, with all the confidence of a dying goose. Meanwhile, below stairs, the kitchen never stops. You descend again, carrying empty cups, and the heat strikes you like an oven door opening. Marjorie already prepares midday pottage while bakers shape fresh loaves upon flour-dusted boards. Agnes scrubs kettles beside the washing trough, sleeves rolled to reddened elbows. The stable dog sleeps beneath the table now, twitching occasionally in dreams. Perhaps he imagines endless sausages. Perhaps he dreams of warmer centuries yet to come where dogs no longer survive entirely on cabbage scraps and emotional resilience. The morning stretches onward in endless little tasks. Sweep ashes. Carry wood. Wash bowls. Fetch onions. Turn spits. Scrub tables. Everything smells of smoke, damp wool, onions, and labour. And slowly, As bells echo once more from the distant monastery beyond the frozen fields, you begin to understand the rhythm of this life. A servant girl survives not through comfort or fairness, but through movement itself. If your hands stay busy enough, your thoughts grow quiet. If your thoughts grow quiet, the long days pass more gently. At least, that is what the older servants seem to believe. Whether they truly believe it is another matter entirely. The hall smells faintly sweeter by midday, though only because fresh rushes have finally been scattered across the stone floor. The old ones, damp with spilled ale and months of muddy boots, were hauled away at dawn by two miserable boys whose expressions suggested they had offended God personally. Now clean reeds mixed with lavender and crushed mint lie beneath the tables, softening footsteps and disguising odours with limited but admirable determination. You carry another armful across the hall while sunlight presses weakly through narrow windows high in the walls. Dust turns golden in the beams. Smoke curls upward lazily from the central hearth, where embers glow beneath hanging kettles. Agnes kneels nearby, arranging the rushes evenly with a wooden rake. Not too thick, she warns quietly. The steward says thick rushes make lazy servants. You stare at her. How? He says comfort encourages sinful thinking. You glance around the freezing hall. A terrifying amount of comfort in here, clearly. For a dangerous moment, Agnes nearly laughs aloud. She hides it quickly behind her sleeve. Laughter travels upward too. The great hall empties during this part of the day. Lords retreat to private chambers. Stewards vanish into counting rooms full of wax seals and endless complaints. Even the guards drift toward the gatehouse for warmth and gossip. Only servants remain moving steadily through the quieter hours, sweeping ashes, polishing cups, carrying wood, repairing benches, and pretending not to hear things. You hear things anyway. Servants always do. Near the hearth, two older maids whisper while sorting linens into neat stacks. They say the Lord's cousin arrived after midnight. With soldiers. With debts. The second maid crosses herself immediately. Debts, apparently, rank somewhere between plague and demonic possession in the medieval imagination. No one can quite agree whether he lost money gambling or buying relics. The first whispers, though honestly, either sounds expensive. You lower your head to hide a smile while sweeping crumbs from beneath the tables. Nearby, a young scullion named Peter scrapes wax from iron candle holders, using a knife so dull it might actually strengthen the wax through encouragement alone. At the far end of the hall hangs a faded tapestry showing saints defeating dragons with expressions of mild inconvenience. One saint spears a serpent while wearing robes so clean they have clearly never visited this manor. The servants avoid standing beneath that tapestry too long. Some swear it brings bad luck. Others claim a mason died repairing the wall behind it generations ago and still wanders nearby at night searching for his missing hammer. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the story began as superstition or merely as an excuse for avoiding extra work near the coldest wall in the hall. Medieval people, you discover, often build legends around practical laziness. A bell rings outside. Not the steward's bell this time. Market bell. Immediately the quieter mood shifts. Servants glance toward the courtyard windows. Stable boys hurry toward the gate. Somewhere downstairs. Marjorie begins shouting about onions with renewed aggression. Market days matter deeply here. Villagers from surrounding fields arrive carrying eggs, smoked fish, wool, onions, turnips, apples, and sometimes strange cures wrapped carefully in cloth bundles. Traders bring gossip too, which honestly may be the manor's favourite imported luxury. Agnes nudges your arm. Come on. We're checking the washing lines. Outside, the air feels sharper now, though the frost has begun melting into muddy tracks across the yard. Carts creak beyond the gatehouse where merchants argue loudly enough to qualify as a regional weather pattern. The washing lines stretch behind the kitchen near a patch of bare winter cabbage. Linen shifts stiffly in the wind like pale ghosts. You help Agnes pin blankets tighter while crows watch from the manor wall with deeply judgmental expressions. "Do you ever leave?" you ask suddenly. Agnes pauses. "Leave where?" "The manor." She thinks about it longer than expected. Sometimes market days. Once for a funeral. She shrugs faintly. Most servant girls stay where they're needed. The answer settles heavily between you. A cart rattles through the gate carrying barrels of salted herring. The smell arrives several moments before the cart itself. Behind it walks a thin pilgrim wearing a weather-stained cloak covered in tiny metal badges stamped with saints and shrines. Peter crosses himself again. "Pilgrims bring luck." Agnes snorts softly. "Pilgrims bring fleas." Honestly, both seem possible. The pilgrim pauses near the well, speaking quietly with one of the guards. Around his neck hangs a small leather pouch tied with the red cord. You notice several servants staring at it curiously. What's inside, you whisper. "Relic. Maybe." Agnes says, "Bone chip. Saint's tooth. Piece of holy cloth." You believe that. She adjusts a blanket against the wind. "I believe people pay money for it." A practical philosophy. The stable dog appears again beside your boots, carrying something unidentifiable and probably alarming. He drops it proudly at your feet. You decide not to inspect it closely. Rewarding medieval dogs only encourages medieval behaviour. Back inside the hall, the afternoon grows dim despite the early hour. Clouds gather over the manor, pressing grey light through the windows while servants begin preparing beeswax candles for evening. Beeswax belongs mostly to noble rooms because it burns cleaner and sweeter than cheap tallow. Downstairs, servants usually receive smoky tallow candles that smell faintly of burnt soup and disappointment. Edith sits beside the hearth threading dried herbs into little hanging bundles. "For evil eyes," she murmurs while tying blue ribbon around one. Peter immediately steps backward. "You shouldn't say that indoors." Edith rolls her eyes. If evil spirits are frightened by old herbs and ribbons, then honestly they deserve to haunt somewhere better. Even Agnes laughs quietly at that. Still, when Edith hangs the charm beside the kitchen door, no one removes it. The afternoon work continues slowly. You scrub tables with vinegar water while rain begins ticking softly against the shutters. Smoke thickens inside the hall. Somewhere above, a noble child cries briefly before being hushed by unseen nurses. Servants pass around little rumours the way wealthier people exchange coins. The steward once imprisoned a thief in the grain cellar. A monk nearby keeps wolves as pets. The Lord's grandfather supposedly buried silver beneath the chapel floor before dying suddenly during winter mass. No one can quite agree whether any of these stories are true, but truth matters less than repetition here. Stories warm cold hours. They fill silence while hands continue working. As evening edges closer, Marjorie sends you below stairs again for more ale casks. This cellar air greets you damp and cold enough to sting your lungs. Rows of barrels disappear into shadow beside hanging smoked fish, and sacks of grain guarded more carefully than most servants. A single candle flickers near the steps. Its light catches strange markings carved into one beam overhead, little circles crossed with lines. You point upward. "What's that?" The older brewer beside you glances briefly. "Witch marks." You blink. Actual witch marks. He shrugs. "Supposed to keep demons from souring the ale." A pause. Didn't always work. Entire medieval economies apparently rest upon people refusing to take chances with angry ghosts and spoiled beer. When you climb back upstairs carrying the heavy ale bucket, dusk has nearly swallowed the windows whole. Candles flicker now across the great hall. Shadows stretch long over fresh rushes. Rain taps steadily upon the roof, while wind slips cold fingers through cracks in the stone. And through it all, servants continue moving quietly from task to task like figures trapped inside the endless turning of some ancient wheel. You begin to understand why older maids whisper to one another at night, why they cling to charms, stories, saints, and rumours, why they laugh softly whenever they can. Because in this manner small comforts matter fiercely. A warm bowl, a dry corner, a shared joke, a dog following close behind in the dark. Sometimes that is enough to carry a servant girl through another winter evening. Evening settles heavily over the manor, thick with rain and wood smoke, and the kitchen grows hotter with every passing moment. By now the hearth roars bright enough to paint the soot-black rafters orange, while steam clouds the air so densely that everyone glistens faintly with heat and exhaustion. Outside, water drips steadily from the eaves into the muddy yard. Inside, the household prepares for supper with the grim focus of soldiers marching toward battle. You stand elbow-deep in onions. An entire basket waits beside you like a personal insult. Your eyes sting fiercely while Agnes chops leeks nearby with the speed of long practice. Around the room, servants hurry between tables carrying trenchers, salted fish, black bread, and pitchers of weak ale. Marjorie commands the chaos from beside the central hearth, wooden spoon in hand like a royal sceptre forged entirely from irritation. "Move faster," she barks. "The Lord eats tonight whether the weather improves or not." A fair point. The rain drums harder against the shutters now. Wind squeezes through the kitchen cracks, carrying the smell of wet hay and cold earth. Somewhere in the courtyard, a mule brays with the emotional depth of a disappointed trumpet. The stable dog sleeps through all of it beneath the preparation table. A life philosophy worth studying. You wipe tears from your eyes after another onion and glance toward the simmering iron pots hanging above the flames. Thick pottage bubbles slowly inside them. Oats, leeks, cabbage, scraps of salted pork, and whatever vegetables survived long enough to avoid becoming soup earlier in the week. Medieval cooking, you notice, often resembles a negotiation between hunger and optimism. Edith hobbles past carrying bundles of dried herbs. "For the meat," she says. Marjorie sniffs suspiciously. "Not too much sage. Sage prevents stomach troubles. Sage costs money. An ancient and eternal disagreement." Still, Edith drops a small handful into the broth when Marjorie turns away. Whether from kindness or rebellion remains unclear. You carry trenchers upstairs shortly afterward, climbing carefully through dim corridors lit by smoky tallow candles. The manor changes at supper hour. Noble voices echo from distant chambers. Guards straighten their belts near the hall entrance. Servants brush straw and mud from their sleeves before appearing above stairs. Though there is only so much dignity possible when you smell faintly of onions and chimney soot. The great hall glows warmly now despite the storm outside. Beeswax candles flicker from iron stands along the walls, casting soft golden light across banners and polished cups. Fresh rushes crackle underfoot. The long tables fill steadily with household retainers, lesser knights, visiting merchants, and anyone important enough to sit indoors rather than beside the kitchen fire. You are not among them. You move silently between benches, pouring ale into cups while trying not to spill anything on expensive sleeves. The Lord himself sits high upon the dais beneath embroidered banners, his fur-lined cloak draped heavily around broad shoulders. Beside him the lady of the manor eats delicately from a silver dish, while musicians near the hearth pluck at strings with sleepy determination. One lute player looks moments away from collapsing directly into his instrument. Honestly, relatable. A servant girl beside you whispers suddenly, "Don't look at the cousin." Naturally, you immediately want to look at the cousin. He sits lower than the lord but higher than everyone else, pale-faced and sharp-eyed beneath carefully combed hair. Rings flash on his fingers each time he lifts his wine cup. He looks tired in the expensive way wealthy people do, where exhaustion somehow still involves velvet sleeves. That's him you whisper. The one with debts. The girl nods faintly. They say creditors followed him all the way from York. No one walks that far happily. Especially creditors. You nearly smile again. The cousin glances suddenly across the hall, and several servants lower their heads at once. Above stairs requires constant invisibility. You learn this quickly. A servant who draws attention risks punishment. A servant who overhears too much risks suspicion. A servant girl especially must move like smoke, useful, quiet, difficult to grasp. Still, you cannot help noticing things. The lady's hands trembling slightly while lifting her cup. The steward whispering urgently beside the dais. A knight quietly pocketing bread beneath the tablecloth, perhaps for later hunger or perhaps simple habit. No one can quite agree whether noble households truly live better than common folk or merely suffer more comfortably. Below stairs, meanwhile, the kitchen continues roaring like a furnace. You return there carrying stacks of greasy trenchers slick with meat fat and gravy. The lower servants eat only after the upper hall finishes, and by then the food has cooled considerably. No one complains aloud. Not safely. Marjorie ladles leftover pottage into bowls while servants crowd near the warmth. Agnes settles beside you on an overturned bucket, holding her meal carefully in both hands. The stable dog materializes instantly beside her knees with supernatural accuracy. "He knows meal hours better than monks know prayer bells," she murmurs. Peter tosses the dog a cabbage scrap. The dog stares at it with visible disappointment. Honestly, same. You eat slowly while rain rattles against the shutters. The pottage tastes mostly of onions and smoke, though occasional bites of pork feel almost luxurious. Across the kitchen, Edith rubs aching fingers beside the fire while quietly muttering prayers to St. Bridget for warmth and protection. Some swear St. Bridget watches over kitchens especially. Others claim she mostly ignores cooks unless bread burns. Even now, it is hard to tell where religion ends and household superstition begins. Perhaps nobody here truly separates them. The conversation drifts lazily through the room between mouthfuls. A pig escaped the neighbouring village last week. Someone spotted ghost lights near the marsh road. A travelling physician once removed a tooth using blacksmith tongs and strong ale. Peter looks horrified. Did the patient live? Marjorie shrugs. The physician did. That answer satisfies no one. The candles burn lower as night deepens around the manor. One by one, servants return to their final duties. Cups washed, floors swept, fires banked carefully beneath ash until morning. Outside, the storm begins fading into softer rain, while distant bells drift faintly across the wet darkness from the abbey beyond the fields. You help Agnes carry scraps toward the refuse pit behind the kitchens. The air outside feels colder now after hours beside the hearth. Mist rises pale above the mud. Somewhere near the stables, horses shift restlessly in their sleep. The little dog follows as always. Agnes scratches behind his ears. You should name him. Dangerous mistake. Why? Name creatures become responsibilities. She considers this quietly while rainwater drips from the eaves nearby. Finally she says, "Everything here becomes a responsibility eventually." The words settle heavier than expected. You stand together a moment longer, listening to the distant bells and soft rain. Above, the manor windows glow gold against the darkness like watchful eyes. Beneath those windows, servants still move quietly through corridors carrying candles, emptying chamber pots, fetching blankets, warming stones for noble beds. The household never fully sleeps. Not really. At last you return inside, where the kitchen embers glow deep red beneath ash. The heat has faded now into something softer, drowsier. Servants spread blankets near the walls. Someone snores already beside the flour sacks. You curl yourself near the warmth with aching hands wrapped beneath your cloak. Smoke drifts lazily overhead. Nearby, Agnes whispers half-asleep prayers into the darkness, while the stable dog circles twice before settling beside your feet. And slowly, as the rain softens outside and monastery bells mark another passing hour beyond the frozen fields, the manor sinks into uneasy rest around you. Tomorrow will begin before dawn again. It always does. Morning returns grey and cold enough to make your bones protest before your eyes even open. The kitchen hearth has dwindled to faint red embers beneath ash, and servants stir reluctantly from blankets spread across the floor like survivors after a siege no one officially acknowledges. Smoke hangs low beneath the rafters. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs with the deep rattling sound of winter settling into the lungs. The stable dog sleeps against your boots, warm and heavy as a sack of damp grain. You almost envy his priorities. Outside, frost coats the yard silver white beneath the sky the colour of old wool. The air smells sharply of wet wood and distant chimney smoke. Bells ring once from the abbey beyond the fields, their hollow notes drifting through the morning mist while servants begin another long day of carrying, scrubbing, hauling, mending and enduring. Today, however, Agnes nudges your shoulder before the steward can begin shouting. You're upstairs. Upstairs where? The lady's chamber. You blink at her through sleep-heavy eyes. That sounds dangerous. It usually is. A comforting start. You wash quickly at the basin beside the kitchen wall where icy water immediately convinces your hands to reconsider all life choices. Then Agnes helps smooth your hair beneath a plain linen veil while muttering instructions rapidly. Do not speak unless spoken to. Don't stare at the lady. Don't touch the painted chest near the window. And if Mistress Cecily asks whether you can sew, I say yes. You say barely. Why barely? Because if you sew well, they give you mending forever. Centuries pass, apparently, but avoiding extra sewing remains timeless wisdom. The upper corridors feel colder than the kitchen despite thicker tapestries hanging along the walls. Stone traps winter in strange ways here. Your footsteps echo softly as you follow a narrow maid carrying warmed water through twisting passages lit by beeswax candles. The lady's chamber waits behind an oak door carved with faded vines and hunting birds. Inside, warmth greets you first. Not true warmth exactly, but softer warmth than anywhere below stairs. A brazier glows near the bed. Thick curtains shield narrow windows from draughts. Fur blankets spill across carved furniture. The room smells faintly of lavender, beeswax, and expensive soap. You immediately become aware of how strongly you smell of smoke. A woman sits near the window brushing out long dark hair while another servant arranges folded gowns across a chest. The lady herself looks younger than expected, though weariness shadows her eyes in ways candlelight cannot soften entirely. Mistress Cecily, her attendant, notices you first. This one, she asks sharply. The maid beside you nods. She can carry water and mend seams. Barely, you add quickly. Mistress Cecily studies you with the disappointment of someone inspecting vegetables during a famine. Fine, bring more coals. And just like that, You belong temporarily to the chamber world above stairs. The morning passes in careful silence. You carry warmed stones for the bed linens. You refill wash basins. You fold gowns heavy with embroidery delicate enough to feed a farming family for months if sold. You learn how noble life operates not through ease, but through invisible labour layered carefully beneath every comfort. A servant girl warms the room before the lady wakes. Another brushes gowns clean. Another carries chamber pots discreetly away before dawn. Luxury, you realise, is mostly other people's exhaustion wearing prettier fabric. The lady sits quietly while Mistress Cecily fastens pearls into her sleeves. "You've tightened this gown again," the lady murmurs. "You requested it, my lady." A pause follows. The lady touches her waist thoughtfully. They say Queen Anne drinks vinegar to remain slender. Mistress Cecily sighs. They also say a bishop in France gave birth to a wolf. No one can quite agree whether noble beauty remedies or village superstitions sound stranger once spoken aloud. You hide your smile carefully while polishing a silver mirror near the hearth. The chamber contains objects unlike anything below stairs, painted prayer books bound in leather, tiny glass perfume bottles, embroidered cushions, carved ivory combs, ribbons folded neatly inside cedar chests. Even the candles burn cleaner here. One small reliquary hangs beside the bed containing what servants whisper might be a fragment of saintly bone. Some swear the relic protects noblewomen during childbirth. Others claim it simply cost enough money that everyone pretends it works. The stable dog, sadly, would probably receive better protection from cabbage leaves and luck. Near midday, the lady dismisses everyone except Mistress Cecily. You retreat gratefully into the corridor carrying folded linens against your chest. The air outside the chamber feels instantly harsher. Servants hurry through the hallways balancing trays and baskets, while the steward stalks past jingling iron keys with enough irritation to sour milk at 20 paces. Somewhere below, pots clang loudly from the kitchen. Real life resumes quickly outside noble rooms. Agnes finds you beside the stairwell. "Well, you were right. About danger. About sewing." She grins tiredly. Mistress Cecily once made a girl mend altar cloths for 3 weeks because she stitched too neatly. An important medieval lesson competence often gets rewarded with more competence. You descend together toward the kitchens carrying soiled linens bound with cord. The laundry room sits near the rear courtyard where heat from enormous boiling vats turns the air damp and suffocating. Women stir linens using long wooden poles while steam clouds the low ceiling. The smell is unforgettable. Soap ash, wet wool, vinegar, human effort. One laundress crosses herself before adding rosemary to the boiling water. "For sickness," she explains. Another woman snorts. "If rosemary cured sickness, we'd all live forever. Better than doing nothing." That seems to summarize half of medieval medicine honestly. You help wring heavy sheets beside the steaming vats until your arms ache sharply from twisting wet fabric. Outside the narrow windows, afternoon snow begins drifting down in soft grey spirals across the courtyard. Winter closes in fully now. By evening the manor grows quieter beneath the snowfall. Sounds soften beneath layers of white gathering on roofs and gate walls. Candles glow warmly through narrow windows while servants hurry indoors carrying the last wood bundles before dark. Upstairs, the noble chambers flicker gold behind closed doors. Downstairs, the kitchen roars once more with smoke and heat. You sit beside Agnes peeling turnips while snow taps softly against the shutters. "Did you ever want something else?" you ask quietly. She keeps peeling for a long moment before answering. "Sometimes." "What?" Agnes shrugs faintly. "A shop maybe, near a bridge town. Warm bread every morning." She smiles weakly. Dry shoes. An ambitious dream by medieval standards. The stable dog lifts his head hopefully at the word bread. Peter tosses him another cabbage leaf. The dog looks personally betrayed. Laughter drifts softly through the kitchen, then fades again into quieter sounds, knives chopping roots, kettles simmering, firewood cracking gently beneath flames. Outside, bells ring faintly through falling snow while darkness settles across the frozen fields beyond the manor walls. And for a little while, sitting there among smoke, steam, wet wool, and weary servants, you begin to sense the hidden loneliness carried by girls like Agnes and the others upstairs. They move through noble chambers silently. They warm beds they will never sleep in. They fold gowns worth more than their families own. And slowly, year after year, they become part of the manor itself, quiet as candle smoke, necessary as firewood, and almost as easily forgotten. Snow remains through the night, though by morning it has already surrendered to slush beneath boots, cartwheels, and impatient livestock. The manor yard becomes a kingdom of mud again before sunrise, churned brown and slick beneath the sky, hanging low and grey over the fields. Water drips steadily from the gatehouse roof while servants hurry across the courtyard, clutching cloaks tight against the cold drizzle. You carry a basket balanced against your hip while Agnes walks beside you, fastening her wool hood beneath her chin. "Market errand," she says, "and don't lose the steward's coins unless you wish to discover entirely new forms of unhappiness." The steward himself waits near the gate arch with 2 guards and his usual expression of permanent betrayal by humanity. "You'll buy onions, lamp oil, salt, and thread," he says, pressing a few silver pennies into Agnes's hand. No wandering, no lingering at ale stalls, no talking to travelling players. Peter, standing nearby with a grain sack, looks disappointed specifically about the players. The steward narrows his eyes. "And absolutely no relic merchants." Agnes nods obediently. The moment you pass beyond the manor gate, she mutters, "Last year one servant bought a saint's finger that turned out to be goat bone. How did they know? The dog stole it. A difficult scandal for everyone involved." The road toward the village twists through open winter fields striped with frost and muddy wagon tracks. Bare trees lean beside the lane while distant smoke rises from scattered cottages beyond the hills. Your boots sink unpleasantly with every step. Somewhere ahead, monastery bells ring through the mist. The stable dog trots after you despite repeated attempts to send him back. Eventually Agnes gives up, pretending not to notice him. He follows whoever feeds him. "That explains you." She rolls her eyes. Travel in winter feels slower than time itself. Carts creak past carrying firewood, turnips, and once an alarming number of geese. Farmers wrapped in rough cloaks nod cautiously while passing, though nobody lingers long in the cold. Even conversation seems frozen today. The village finally appears through drifting mist clustered around a stone church and narrow market square. Smoke hangs low over thatched roofs. Chickens dart through puddles with urgent little movements, while traders shout prices from beneath damp canvas awnings. The smell arrives first. Wood smoke, wet wool, fish brine, fresh bread, mud, livestock, humanity. Medieval markets truly believe in offering every possible scent simultaneously. You follow Agnes between crowded stalls where villagers haggle fiercely over onions and salted eels, as though national survival depends entirely upon root vegetables. A fishmonger waves smoked herring dangerously close to your face while shouting discounts nobody requested. Nearby, a woman sells tiny cloth charms stuffed with herbs. For safe childbirth, she insists to passing wives. An old man beside her mutters. Last winter she sold charms against lightning. The woman shrugs. Lightning season ended. A practical business strategy. Agnes pauses beside a thread merchant while you wait holding the basket against your chest. Around you the market churns endlessly with sound and motion. Boots splashing through mud, merchants arguing over tolls, bells ringing faintly from the church tower, children chasing one another past carts stacked with cabbages. A travelling healer stands near the square fountain displaying jars of cloudy liquid beneath a faded banner. Cures fevers, eases toothache, strengthens the blood. Peter eyes the bottles nervously. You think those work? No, Agnes says immediately. The healer overhears. They contain rare Eastern herbs. Agnes points toward one jar. That's onion floating in ale. The healer pauses thoughtfully. Medicinal onion. Honestly, confidence carries half of medieval medicine. You continue deeper into the market where snowmelt drips steadily from rooftops overhead. Near the church wall, pilgrims gather around a bent old monk displaying relics beneath glass cases. Tiny bones, fragments of cloth, a rusted nail. The monk raises one bony finger dramatically. This fragment touched the tomb of St. Edric himself. Some villagers cross themselves instantly, others stare with exhausted skepticism. No one can quite agree whether relics truly carry holiness, or whether people simply need something solid to hold during difficult winters. Even now, beneath the grey sky and church bells, faith and desperation seem woven tightly together. The stable dog suddenly growls softly beside your boots. A stranger stands watching nearby. Tall, hooded, mud-spattered cloak. For one strange moment he seems focused entirely on Agnes before turning away into the crowd again. She notices your expression. What? That man? She glances briefly. Probably nothing. But her voice sounds thinner now. The church bell rings noon. Agnes hurries the shopping afterward with sharper movements than before. Salt wrapped carefully in cloth. Lamp oil corked tightly against leaks. A loaf of dark bread added quietly despite not appearing on the steward's list. For tonight, she murmurs. You leave the market soon after beneath lowering clouds threatening more snow. The road home feels quieter somehow. Behind you, the village fades slowly into mist and chimney smoke, while ravens circle darkly above distant fields. Halfway back, the weather finally breaks. Rain begins suddenly, cold and hard against your hood. Mud deepens instantly beneath your boots while wind lashes across the open road carrying sleet sharp enough to sting your cheeks. Peter curses softly after slipping near a wagon rut. The stable dog, meanwhile, appears deeply delighted by conditions. Mad creature, Agnes mutters. Ahead. A roadside shrine emerges through the rain beneath twisted ash trees. A little wooden shelter surrounds a painted saint darkened by years of weather and candle smoke. Someone has left apples there recently beside melted wax and tiny copper coins. Travellers often stop at such shrines before dangerous roads or winter crossings. Some swear roadside saints protect honest souls from thieves and wolves. Others believe leaving offerings simply makes people feel less alone beneath long empty skies. You shelter there briefly from the sleet. Rain drums softly upon the little roof while Agnes unwraps the hidden loaf of bread. The four of you share it quietly, you, Agnes, Peter, and the muddy dog staring upward with desperate devotion. Peter rubs warmth back into his hands. My mother says spirits wander crossroads during storms. Helpful, Agnes says dryly. She leaves iron nails near the doorway. Against spirits. Against bad luck. You glance at the endless muddy road stretching through grey fields. How's that working for her? Peter considers carefully. She married my father. Fair enough. The storm softens at last into drifting rain again. You continue toward the manor while dusk slowly gathers across the countryside. Smoke rises ahead from the great hall chimneys. Bells ring faintly once more from the abbey beyond the river. The steward waits inside the gatehouse when you arrive. Naturally, he inspects the supply suspiciously while rainwater drips from your cloaks onto the stone floor. You took too long. There was weather, Agnes replies carefully. There is always weather. An unfortunately solid point. Still, he lets you pass. Warmth rushes over you again once the kitchen doors swing open. Firelight, steam, onion broth, wet wool drying near the hearth. The familiar sounds of bowls clattering and servants muttering softly after another long day. Outside, rain darkens the manor walls. Inside, life folds inward once more toward candles and heat. And as you stand there thawing your aching hands beside the roaring kitchen fire, you realize the world beyond the manor feels no freer than the world within it. Roads carry danger, markets carry hunger, villages carry debts, sickness, and endless winters. A servant girl may dream of leaving, but the medieval world waits cold and uncertain beyond every gate. Rain lingers for 3 straight days after the market journey, turning the manor grounds into a swamp of churned mud and standing puddles that reflect the grey sky like dull metal. Water drips constantly from the eaves, cloaks never fully dry. Even the rushes inside the great hall begin smelling faintly of mildew despite Edith scattering mint and lavender with determined optimism. You wake each morning to the same sounds, now coughing servants, crackling embers, distant bells, and the steward shouting at someone before dawn has properly arrived. Routine settles over the manor like another layer of smoke. Yet beneath that routine, tension moves quietly. You notice it in the way servants lower their voices when the steward passes, in the way guards linger longer near the gatehouse, in the sudden appearance of locked chests carried upstairs beneath heavy wool coverings. Something troubles the household. No one says it plainly. No one ever does. The manor court gathers on the 4th morning after market day. By sunrise, villagers already crowd the outer yard wearing cloaks darkened by rain while carts line the road beyond the gate. Farmers, tenants, millers, shepherds, widows clutching petitions, and one extremely nervous-looking pig trader all wait beneath the cold drizzle for judgment, fines, or complaints to be heard. Agnes nudges your shoulder while tying her apron. Stay quiet today. Why? The court listens to everything. A terrifying hobby. The great hall transforms before midday into something halfway between legal chamber and crowded barn. Tables shift against the walls. Candles burn despite the grey daylight pressing through narrow windows. The Lord's chair stands upon the dais beneath hanging banners, while scribes arrange parchment rolls with ink-stained fingers. You carry benches into place beside Peter while villagers file slowly inside, trailing mud across the fresh rushes. A monk from the abbey arrives too, robes dripping rainwater onto the floor. The stable dog immediately distrusts him on sight. Honestly, the dog's instincts have proven fairly reliable. The monk notices. "Animals sense sin," he murmurs darkly. Peter pales instantly. The dog sneezes and wanders away toward the kitchen. The monk looks mildly offended. Court begins with bells. The steward reads names from a parchment while villagers shuffle nervously before the dais. Most disputes sound painfully ordinary. A missing goat, broken fence posts, unpaid grain dues. A complaint involving geese and suspected sorcery somehow becomes especially heated. No one can quite agree whether the widow cursed the flock. One servant whispers beside you, but the geese did begin attacking people afterward. Maybe they were simply geese. The servant considers this. Fair. The scribes scratch endlessly across parchment, while the Lord listens with growing boredom hidden beneath noble dignity. You notice his cousin nearby again, pale-faced and restless, fingers tapping the arm of his chair while rain rattles softly against the shutters. The atmosphere inside the hall feels thick with damp wool, candle smoke, and unease. Then the steward calls another name. Marta Fletcher. A young village woman steps forward, clutching her shawl tightly around thin shoulders. Beside her stands a farmer, red-faced with anger. "She stole bread," he snaps immediately. "I did not. You were seen near my ovens." Marta's hands tremble visibly. "My children were hungry." Silence settles briefly across the hall. The Lord looks irritated more than cruel, which somehow feels worse. Hunger appears here not as tragedy but inconvenience, another problem needing settlement before supper. The steward folds his hands. Did anyone witness the theft? A pause follows. Then, unexpectedly, Agnes speaks quietly beside you. "She bought bread in market 4 days ago." You glance at her in surprise. The steward narrows his eyes. "You saw this?" "Yes, Master Steward." Which is technically true. The farmer hesitates uncertainly now. The scribes exchange glances. Finally the Lord waves one impatient hand. "Fine her 2 pennies for disturbance and dismiss the matter." Relief flashes across Marta's face so quickly it almost hurts to witness. Court continues, but something shifts inside you afterward. You begin noticing how carefully servants survive this place not merely through labour, but through silence, timing, and tiny acts of mercy hidden beneath obedience. Agnes did not challenge authority openly. She simply bent truth gently enough to save someone from harsher punishment. A dangerous skill. Hours drag onward beneath dripping weather and endless grievances. You carry watered ale among the gathered villagers, while listening unintentionally to fragments of lives unravelling before the court. A shepherd fined after losing sheep during storms. A widow begging delay on winter taxes. A miller accused of using false weights. Some swear manor courts protect order and fairness. Others insist they exist mainly to remind poor people exactly who owns the grain, fields, roads, ovens, rivers, and sometimes even the air itself. Even now, watching tired villagers bow before men wrapped in fur-lined cloaks, it becomes difficult to argue otherwise. The cousin leaves the hall briefly during the afternoon. You notice because Agnes stiffens suddenly beside the serving table. What is it? Nothing, but her eyes remain fixed toward the doorway long after he disappears. Rain deepens outside, candles burn lower, villagers huddle closer together for warmth while the scribes continue scratching lines across parchment with relentless patience. Then shouting erupts near the entrance. 2 guards drag in a boy perhaps 14 years old soaked entirely through with mud. One guard grips a snared rabbit dangling upside down by its feet. "Poaching," the guard announces proudly. The boy looks half frozen. "I was hungry." Apparently everyone this week is hungry. The steward sighs heavily as though poverty itself personally inconveniences him. That forest belongs to the manor. The boy lowers his eyes. "Yes, master." For a moment nobody speaks. Rain taps steadily overhead. Firewood crackles softly in the hearth. Somewhere far away a bell rings from the abbey through drifting mist. Finally the Lord gestures lazily. 3 lashes and release him. The hall grows quieter afterward. Not shocked. Not angry. Simply quieter. You feel Agnes beside you standing perfectly still. No one can quite agree whether medieval life hardens people or merely exhausts them too deeply for constant outrage. Perhaps both happen together until survival leaves little room for anything else. The punishment occurs outside near the gatehouse before dusk. Most servants avoid watching directly. You help Marjorie prepare evening pottage instead while Wynne rattles the kitchen shutters. Still, you hear it. Short sounds carried faintly through the rain. Peter scrubs bowls with unusual focus afterward. Marjorie stirs the broth harder than necessary. Edith hangs another little herb charm near the door without explanation. The stable dog curls close beside the hearth, unusually quiet for once. And slowly the manor folds inward again toward evening routine, swallowing discomfort the way old stone swallows smoke. By nightfall the court has ended. Villagers vanish back into rain-dark roads and muddy fields carrying fines, judgments, worries, and whatever scraps of dignity remain after standing beneath noble eyes all day. Servants clean the hall in weary silence. You sweep soaked rushes toward the hearth, while Agnes gathers empty cups from the tables. Finally she speaks softly. You learn quickly here. About what? She looks toward the darkened doorway leading outside. When to look away. The words linger heavily between you while candles flicker low across the hall. Beyond the walls, rain continues falling over fields, roads, forests, shrines, and little cottages scattered through the darkness. Somewhere the poacher boy limps home through mud carrying nothing for supper. Somewhere Marta divides bread carefully among hungry children. And inside the manor, servants bank the fires, lower their heads, and prepare quietly for another dawn beneath the bells. The rain finally breaks during the night, though the cold left behind feels sharper somehow, creeping through the cracks of the manor like thin, invisible fingers. By dawn, frost glitters across the courtyard puddles, sealing yesterday's mud beneath fragile skins of ice that shatter softly beneath hurried boots. Smoke rises straight upward from the chimneys for the first time in days, a sign of still weather. Edith claims still weather before winter. Solstice means wandering spirits travel more easily because the wind cannot scatter them properly. Marjorie claims Edith says this every year to avoid taking the refuse bucket out after dark. Honestly, both explanations feel believable. The manor wakes slowly after court day. Servants move with heavier limbs, quieter voices. Even the steward seems dulled by exhaustion, though he still manages to criticize the angle of stacked firewood before sunrise, proving true dedication to misery. You spend most of the morning hauling baskets of peat and split logs toward the kitchens while Agnes scrubs soot from iron pots nearby. The stable dog trails both of you faithfully, pausing occasionally to investigate deeply suspicious turnips. By afternoon, clouds gather once more over the hills. Not rain clouds this time. Snow clouds. The air smells different before snowfall arrives, cleaner somehow, colder, edged with the scent of distant pine smoke and frozen earth. You notice servants glancing toward the sky more often while the guards at the gatehouse tighten cloaks around their shoulders. Then the steward appears. Naturally. You, he says, pointing toward you and Agnes, just take bread and ale to the gatehouse. Now. Unless you've discovered time travel. An exciting possibility, admittedly. The gatehouse sits above the main entrance tunnel where thick oak doors and iron fittings guard the manor road. Inside, warmth clings stubbornly to the stone chamber thanks to a narrow hearth struggling bravely against drafts creeping through arrow slits. 3 guards sit around the fire, sharpening knives and muttering about weather. A bent old beggar occupies the corner nearest the wall, wrapped in patched blankets that smell faintly of wet sheep. And beside the hearth stands the monk again. The same monk from court day. Rain-dark robes. Sharp eyes. Hands folded calmly inside wide sleeves. The stable dog stops immediately in the doorway and growls low in his throat. The monk notices. Again? You keep strange company, he says softly. Agnes sets down the ale jug without answering. Snow begins outside moments later. Soft at first, then heavier. White flakes drift past the narrow arrow slits while twilight settles early across the frozen fields beyond the gate. One guard pokes the fire with a stick while another chews stale bread thoughtfully. Roads'll vanish by morning, he mutters. The monk nods. Winter hides many things. A wonderfully unsettling sentence to hear after dark. You linger near the hearth longer than necessary because the warmth feels precious after the freezing yard outside. The beggar beside the wall studies the flames with watery eyes, while quietly rubbing a tiny wooden charm between his fingers. You glance closer. A carved saint. Worn nearly smooth. Protection, you ask softly. The old man shrugs. Habit. Then after a pause, some swear the dead walk easier during first snow. Peter, who arrived moments ago carrying extra firewood, immediately pales again. The guards laugh. One of them spits into the hearth. If the dead return, they can help repair the south wall. A practical approach to haunting. Still, as darkness thickens outside and snow piles against the gate tunnel, the chamber grows quieter. Firelight flickers across damp stone walls. Wind hums faintly beyond the doors like distant voices travelling the road. The monk finally speaks again. Your servant's below stairs. Agnes nods carefully. I served once, he says. This surprises everyone slightly. You, Peter, blurts. The monk almost smiles. Before the abbey, he studies the fire a moment. Manor kitchens, winter roads, cold floors. I remember. No one answers immediately. It feels strange imagining holy men scrubbing pots or sleeping beside kitchen embers. Monks always seem born already old, ink-stained, and mildly disappointed by humanity. No one can quite agree whether monastery life is easier, the beggar mutters suddenly. You work less, but they wake you for prayers before dawn. Peter looks horrified. Why? To pray. At that hour, the beggar nods gravely. God apparently keeps unusual schedules. Even the monk laughs softly at that. Outside, snow thickens steadily now, swallowing the road beyond the gatehouse in pale silence. Travellers arriving late hurry desperately through the gates before full dark 2 merchants leading exhausted horses, a woman carrying a sleeping child beneath heavy blankets, and finally a lone cart driver whose wheel nearly collapses entering the yard. The guards curse loudly and rush outside. You follow to help almost without thinking. Cold hits instantly like icy water against your face. Snow whirls through torchlight while men strain against the tilted wagon wheel buried deep in frozen mud. The horse snorts clouds of steam into the darkness. Push. Everyone pushes. Boots slide, mud splashes, the wheel groans horribly. For one dreadful second it seems ready to snap entirely. Then suddenly the cart lurches free. The driver nearly weeps with relief. You owe St. Christopher a candle, one guard mutters. The driver nods fervently. I owe him several. Inside again. The gatehouse feels warmer than before simply because you survived stepping back outdoors. Snow melts slowly from cloaks near the hearth, while the beggar dozes lightly beside the wall. Agnes stands near the arrow slit staring into the storm. You know him, you whisper quietly. The monk? She hesitates. He visited once before. When? Last winter. Something in her voice tells you not to push further. The monk glances briefly toward her across the room but says nothing. The fire burns lower as evening deepens. One guard begins telling stories about wolves seen near the forest road during harsher winters. Another swears travellers vanished entirely on the marsh path years ago after following strange lantern lights through fog. Will-o'-wisps, Peter whispers nervously. Drunken shepherds, the first guard replies. Even now, it is hard to tell where folklore ends and loneliness begins during long medieval winters. Roads disappear beneath snow, bells echo through darkness, travellers vanish, stories grow naturally from such nights. At last the steward sends word for everyone below stairs to return before the gates close fully until morning. You leave the gatehouse with Agnes beneath swirling snow and torchlight. The courtyard lies hushed now beneath white drifts gathering against walls and barrels. Windows glow golden across the manor like distant watchfires. Halfway to the kitchen door, Agnes suddenly stops. What? She looks back once toward the gatehouse tower where faint firelight flickers behind narrow slits in the stone. Then quietly she says, "Some people leave manors." The words disappear almost instantly into the wind. Before you can answer, she pulls her hood tighter and keeps walking through the snow toward the warmth below stairs, while behind you the great oak gates close heavily against the winter night. Snow buries the world by morning. The manor walls rise from white drifts like dark stone islands, while the fields beyond vanish entirely beneath wind-shaped blankets of frost. Every sound arrives, muffled, now footsteps softened beneath snow, distant bells dulled by winter air, even the stable horses snorting quietly through clouds of steam. The cold feels alive. It slips through cloak seams, creeps beneath doors, settles into fingers and knees until every movement aches faintly. You wake before dawn beside the kitchen hearth with the stable dog pressed against your side for warmth. Around you servants uncurl stiffly from blankets and straw pallets, while embers glow weakly beneath grey ash. Marjorie already stands awake. Of course she does. Some swear cooks never sleep fully because their souls become permanently tied to the fire. Others claim Marjorie survives entirely through fury and onion broth. Both theories remain plausible. "Cellars today," she announces while shoving coarse bread into your hands. "Winter stores need checking before anything freezes solid." The kitchen groans collectively. Nobody enjoys the lower cellars. Not because they are haunted exactly, merely because they feel like they should be. After a hurried breakfast of hard bread dipped in weak ale, you follow Agnes through narrow stone passages beneath the manor. The air grows colder with every step downward. Candlelight flickers weakly against damp walls where ancient mortar sweats with winter moisture. The smell changes too. Earth, salt, smoke, stored grain, old wood, and somewhere beneath it all, the faint sour scent of too many winters trapped underground. Agnes lifts her candle higher as the passage widens into the great storage vaults beneath the manor hall. Rows of barrels stretch into shadow. Salted pork hanging from hooks. Bundles of onions braided together. Sacks of oats stacked taller than men. Casks of ale. Hard cheese sealed in wax. Dried peas. Smoked fish. Enough food, perhaps to carry the household through winter if rats, damp, thieves, sickness, and human greed behave themselves for several months in a row. An ambitious expectation. The steward waits already beside the grain stores holding a parchment roll while two servants count sacks nearby. "You'll inspect for spoilage," he says curtly, "and if I discover anyone stealing." He lets the threat hang unfinished. No one needs details. The cellar work begins slowly. You check barrels for leaks while Agnes brushes mould from stored turnips. Another servant carries lanterns deeper into the vaults where frost has crept through cracks in the stone. Somewhere water drips steadily in the darkness. The stable dog follows despite repeated objections, padding cautiously over the cold floor while sniffing every sack with professional seriousness. "He'll find rats before cats do," Agnes mutters. "Or become one." Fair concern, honestly. Further inside the cellar, Smaller locked rooms branch away behind heavy oak doors banded with iron. One stores wine reserved for noble tables. Another contains spices so costly the steward personally guards the keys like sacred relics. Cinnamon, pepper, cloves, tiny fragrant luxuries worth absurd amounts of silver because somewhere far beyond these frozen fields, merchants crossed oceans and deserts so rich people could sprinkle excitement onto boiled meat. History is strange sometimes. You help move smoked herring into a drier corner while Edith inspects hanging herbs tied from the rafters overhead. Mouse droppings, she mutters darkly near one shelf. Peter immediately recoils. How many? Enough. An unfortunately flexible measurement. The deeper cellar passages feel older than the manor above. Stone arches sag slightly overhead, blackened by centuries of smoke and damp. Candle shadows move strangely along the walls, while cold air creeps upward from unseen cracks beneath the foundations. No one can quite agree whether parts of these vaults predate the manor entirely. Some swear monks once stored plague bodies here generations ago. Others insist smugglers dug hidden tunnels beneath the riverbank. Marjorie claims both stories are nonsense designed by lazy servants avoiding cellar duty. Still, nobody likes walking there alone, especially after dark. Near midday, the steward unlocks the grain chamber for inspection. Thick oak doors creak open, revealing stacks of wheat and barley carefully protected from damp. You notice immediately how much grain fills the room. Far more than what appears upstairs on servant tables. Agnes notices your expression. Quietly she says, "Winter math." What? The Lord counts differently than hungry people do. The answer settles heavily inside the cold cellar air. Outside these walls, villagers ration black bread and cabbage through snowstorms, while beneath the manor enough grain waits to feed dozens for weeks. Yet the stores remain locked carefully away against future shortages, taxes, trade, and noble caution. Survival here belongs mostly to whoever owns the keys. A sudden crash echoes from deeper in the vaults. Everyone startles. Peter nearly drops his lantern. The stable dog barks furiously before charging into the shadows. You follow instinctively, past hanging meat hooks, past stacked ale casks, past dripping stone arches, until finally you find the source near the far wall. A servant girl kneels beside a broken crate of apples scattered across the floor. She cannot be older than 13. Terror fills her face. "I slipped," she whispers immediately. The apples rolled everywhere, bruising against stone. The steward arrives moments later, breathing sharply through his nose. For a terrible second nobody speaks. Then Agnes quietly kneels beside the girl and begins gathering apples without comment. You do the same. Peter follows awkwardly after. Soon the others help too. The steward watches in silence long enough to make everyone uncomfortable before finally snapping. Next time carry smaller crates. And just like that, a catastrophe passes. Barely. The younger girl blinks rapidly while clutching bruised apples against her apron. You realize then how fragile survival feels here for servant girls. One mistake, one broken dish, one missing loaf, one moment of clumsiness before the wrong person. Lives tilt easily in places like this. The afternoon drifts onward in dim candlelight and endless inventory. Outside, snow continues falling steadily over the manor roofs, while below ground servants count food meant largely for other people. By evening your fingers ache from cold despite the heavy cloak wrapped around your shoulders. Agnes rubs warmth back into her hands beside the ale cask, while Edith mutters prayers against spoiled grain and hungry rats. The stable dog eventually emerges proudly from somewhere beneath the barrels carrying a dead mouse. Peter looks horrified. Marjorie looks impressed. "Useful creature," she declares. The dog radiates smug satisfaction. At last the steward dismisses everyone upstairs. You climb slowly from the cellar vaults carrying empty baskets, while warmer air gradually returns around you. Kitchen smells drift faintly through the corridors, now onion broth, roasting roots, fresh bread. Above stairs, noble candles already glow through cracks beneath chamber doors. Below stairs, servants gather wearily beside the hearth after another winter day spent preserving comforts they may never fully share. You settle near the fire beside Agnes while snow taps softly against the shutters overhead. After a long silence, she says quietly, "My brother once stole grain." You glance toward her. "What happened?" "He got caught." Another pause. The steward said hunger explains many things, but it doesn't excuse them. The flames crackle softly between you. Outside, bells ring faintly through the snowfall once more, and deep beneath the manor, behind locked oak doors and iron keys, the winter stores wait patiently in the dark while servants dream of warm bread and spring roads still impossibly far away. Winter feasts arrive like storms in manor houses. You feel them approaching long before the first guests appear. The kitchens swell with heat and shouting. Extra candles emerge from locked cupboards. Musicians wander the corridors tuning lutes and pipes, with expressions suggesting deep personal regret. Servants scrub walls already stained by centuries of smoke, while the steward develops entirely new levels of irritation previously believed impossible. By dawn the manor churns with preparation. A neighbouring knight and his household are expected before nightfall, along with several merchants trapped nearby by snow-heavy roads, which means the Lord has decided this miserable stretch of winter shall become an opportunity for hospitality, politics, and alarming quantities of roasted meat. Unfortunately, hospitality mostly means extra work for you. You wake to Marjorie thrusting a sack of onions directly into your arms. "Peel!" "How many?" "All of them." The sack appears capable of feeding an army or perhaps besieging a castle through emotional warfare alone. The kitchen roars around you from sunrise onward. Fires blaze beneath iron spits turning geese, rabbits, and a single magnificent boar's head decorated already with winter apples and herbs. Steam fogs every surface. Flour coats the bakers so completely they resemble spirits risen specifically to knead dough. Agnes darts between tables carrying trenchers stacked to her chin. "You still alive?" she asks. "Barely." "Good. The steward says exhaustion builds character." The steward would say that while drowning. A dangerous joke. Agnes hides a smile quickly behind her sleeve. The stable dog circles the room with desperate optimism, while every servant threatens him at least once per hour. Somehow he survives entirely through charm and stolen scraps. Marjorie catches Peter nibbling roasted chestnuts before noon. The resulting lecture lasts longer than some royal ceremonies. You eat after the hall eats, but they'll never notice one chestnut. That, Marjorie declares, pointing dramatically with a dripping spoon, is exactly how kingdoms collapse. An unusually strong political theory regarding chestnuts. Outside, snow continues drifting softly over the manor roofs while arriving guests stomp frost from boots inside the gatehouse. Servants hurry through corridors carrying armfuls of firewood, candles, blankets, and warmed wine. Everywhere you look, someone rushes somewhere else. Feasts, you realize, operate like elaborate theatre performances where nobles receive applause and servants prevent disasters invisibly backstage. By late afternoon, the great hall transforms completely. Fresh rushes cover the floor thickly enough to soften footsteps. Evergreen branches hang from rafters beside ribbons and tiny carved saints, dusted with candlelight. Long tables gleam beneath polished cups and platters, while beeswax candles throw warm gold across the stone walls. For one brief moment before guests enter, the hall almost feels magical. Then the steward begins shouting again and reality returns immediately. You help Agnes arrange trenchers along the lower tables while musicians warm stiff fingers beside the hearth. Smoke curls lazily upward toward the rafters, where shadows gather thick as old memories. "Look," Peter whispers suddenly. The Lord's cousin stands near the dais, speaking quietly with a richly dressed merchant wrapped in fur-lined sleeves. Their expressions remain tense despite the feast preparations around them. "Still in debt, you murmur?" "Probably more now," Agnes replies. No one can quite agree whether nobles enjoy feasts because they celebrate power, or because candles and music briefly distract everyone from taxes, war, weather, and mortality. Perhaps rich people simply prefer worrying beautifully. The guests arrive at sunset. Snow follows them indoors in glittering swirls while servants rush forward taking cloaks and boots. Laughter fills the hall quickly afterward, along with the smell of spiced wine, roasted meat, wet wool, and melting frost. You move constantly now. Pour aller. Carry bread. Refill trenchers. Clear bones. Avoid important feet. The feast unfolds in noisy waves around you. Noble voices rise above the music while candles flicker against silver cups and embroidered sleeves. Merchants boast loudly about roads, prices, and storms survived. Knights exaggerate hunting stories with heroic commitment. One claims he fought 3 wolves alone. Peter whispers. It was probably one angry dog. Honestly, likely. The Lord laughs heavily at something near the dais while servants weave invisibly through the crowded hall, balancing dishes hot enough to blister fingers through cloth. A roasted swan appears at one point entirely covered in feathers again for decoration. You stare at it briefly. Medieval feasts often solve problems nobody actually has. Still, the guests cheer. Below the music and laughter, however, another world continues quietly. A kitchen maid crying softly after spilling wine on a noble sleeve. A servant boy limping from burned hands. Agnes rubbing her wrist between trips because the platters grow heavier every hour. You notice these things now instinctively. The hidden labour beneath celebration. At the lower tables, household guards gamble with carved bone dice between courses, while travellers exchange stories beside the fire. One merchant swears roads north of the river remain haunted by lantern spirits leading wagons into marshes. A knight snorts dismissively. Fog and fools. Then why do horses refuse the road? The knight pauses thoughtfully. Horses are famously dramatic. Fair enough. The musicians play faster after more wine circulates. Pipes squeal, lutes hum, boots stamp against rushes. Candle smoke thickens overhead while snow presses silently against the narrow windows beyond all the warmth and noise. The stable dog eventually succeeds in stealing a sausage. For approximately 6 glorious seconds he becomes the happiest creature in England. Then Marjorie spots him. Chaos follows. The dog shoots beneath the tables, pursued by 2 furious kitchen boys while guests lift their boots laughing. One merchant nearly spills wine entirely down his own chest trying to avoid the chase. Even the lady of the manor smiles faintly behind her cup. The dog escapes. Naturally. Heroes come in many forms. By midnight the feast softens gradually into slower conversation and drowsy music. Candles burn low, guests slump comfortably near the hearth while servants continue clearing trenchers piled with bones, crumbs, and abandoned crusts. Your legs ache fiercely now. Smoke stings your eyes. Grease clings beneath your nails despite endless washing. And still the work continues, because feasts end slowly for nobles but never truly end for servants. The hall must be cleaned. Fire's banked. I'll accounted. Silver checked carefully against theft. You and Agnes gather cups long after the musicians stop playing. Snowlight glows faintly through the high windows while exhausted guests disappear toward prepared chambers upstairs. The Lord's cousin remains awake near the dying fire, speaking quietly with the monk from the gatehouse. You catch only fragments while passing. Cannot stay. Road's unsafe. Abbey may shelter. Agnes hears too. Her face tightens briefly before she lowers her eyes again. Outside, the storm has stopped completely now. The world beyond the manor lies silent beneath moonlit snow. Bells drift faintly from the distant abbey, carried through frozen air like soft echoes from another life entirely. At last you collapse beside the kitchen hearth near dawn while servants settle around the fading warmth. The stable dog curls triumphantly at your feet, still smelling faintly of stolen sausage and victory. Around you everyone looks half dreaming from exhaustion. And above stairs, behind oak doors and fur blankets, the noble guests sleep warmly, while the hidden machinery of the manor finally slows into silence for a few precious hours before morning begins again. The feast leaves the manor tired for days afterward. Grease lingers in the air despite open shutters. Empty ale casks clutter the lower corridors. Servants move more slowly now, worn thin by too little sleep and too much labour compressed into candlelit nights. Even the steward's shouting sounds faintly hoarse, which feels almost festive in itself. Snow still covers the fields beyond the walls, though dirty paths now cut through the drifts where carts and boots have worn narrow tracks toward the gatehouse. Smoke hangs low over the roofs beneath a pale winter sky. You spend most of the morning scrubbing wine stains from the great hall tables beside Agnes, while Peter sweeps rushes into piles already damp with melted snow and spilled ale. The stable dog sleeps directly in everyone's way with complete confidence. A survival skill worth admiring. By afternoon the manor settles into quieter rhythms again. Guests remain snowbound for now, though noble voices drift lazily through upper chambers instead of roaring across the hall. Musicians nap near the kitchens, guards gamble in the gatehouse. Somewhere a servant endlessly chops onions with the hopeless determination of a condemned philosopher. Then Edith begins coughing. At first nobody notices. Everyone coughs in winter. Smoke, cold air, damp blankets, crowded sleeping corners. Servant life practically encourages lung misery as a hobby. But by evening the cough deepens into something rougher, dragging painfully from her chest while she sits pale-faced beside the hearth, sorting herbs with trembling fingers. Marjorie frowns immediately. That's not good. An impressively understated diagnosis. Edith waves one hand weakly. Just winter. Then she coughs again, hard enough to bend forward. The kitchen quiets slightly around her. No one can quite agree whether illness frightens medieval people more because it arrives so often, or because it arrives so mysteriously. A healthy servant may wake feverish by sunset. A minor chill becomes burial bells 3 days later. Remedies exist everywhere. Garlic, vinegar, leeches, charms, prayers, honeyed herbs, but certainty exists nowhere. Agnes kneels beside Edith first. You should rest. Rest where? Edith asks softly. An unfortunate but fair question. Servants do not possess spare rooms waiting gently for sickness. Eventually Marjorie orders blankets spread beside the warmest section of hearth, while Peter carries heated stones wrapped in cloth from the ovens. You help fetch water while Agnes mixes dried thyme, honey, and bitter-smelling herbs into steaming broth. Edith drinks reluctantly. Tastes like boiled boots. That means it's medicinal, Agnes says. Even Edith laughs weakly at that before another coughing fit steals the sound away. Outside, darkness gathers early across the snowy yard. Wind rattles faintly against the shutters while bells ring from the abbey beyond the frozen fields. The monk arrives shortly after sunset. No one sees him enter. One moment the kitchen hums quietly with cooking and whispers. The next he stands beside the hearth shaking snow from his cloak, while the stable dog watches suspiciously from beneath the table. I heard someone was ill. Marjorie crosses her arms. Abby sends healers now. Sometimes. The monk kneels beside Edith calmly, fingers cool against her forehead. She needs warmth, broth, rest, a pause, and luck. A refreshingly honest medical assessment. From his satchel he removes little cloth bundles smelling sharply of mint and sage. For breathing. Edith eyes them skeptically. If I survive, I'll owe the abbey. You already owe the abbey, Marjorie mutters. We all do. Taxes, grain dues, prayers, candles, medieval institutions truly excel at recurring expenses. The monk hangs one herb bundle near the hearth where steam rises softly around it. The scent spreads slowly through the kitchen, fresh and sharp beneath heavier smells of smoke and onions. Some swear herbs cleanse sickness from the air itself. Others believe pleasant smells simply make dying rooms less miserable. Even now, watching Edith struggle beneath rough wool blankets, certainty feels very far away. The evening grows quieter afterward. Servants speak softly while working, bowls clatter less loudly. Even Peter stops fidgeting constantly. Illness changes the shape of rooms somehow, bending conversation inward toward worry. You sit beside Agnes grinding mustard seeds with vinegar into a paste Edith insists helps chest sickness. Does it? Agnes shrugs tiredly. My grandmother used it. Did she survive? Another pause. For a while. Medieval medicine often measures success very creatively. The monk remains near the hearth longer than expected, helping Peter carry water buckets and occasionally checking Edith's breathing. At one point Agnes catches his eye briefly across the room. Something passes silently between them. Not romance exactly. Recognition, perhaps. Shared history. You remember the gatehouse conversation, the way Agnes watched him through falling snow. Finally, and while Marjorie stirs pottage nearby, you ask quietly. You knew him before the abbey. Agnes keeps grinding herbs. He worked here years ago. At the manor? She nods faintly. In the stables? What happened? The pestle slows beneath her hand. He left. That is clearly not the whole story. But before you can ask further, Edith begins coughing again violently enough to steal everyone's attention. The monk kneels quickly beside her while Marjorie presses warm broth into trembling hands. For a long moment the kitchen holds its breath. Then gradually the coughing eases. Edith sinks back against the blankets exhausted but breathing easier than before. Relief spreads quietly through the room like warmth returning after cold wind. The stable dog creeps closer and curls beside her feet. Even he seems worried now. Outside, snow begins falling again softly through the darkness. Tiny flakes drift past the kitchen shutters while the manor settles deeper into winter silence. Somewhere above stairs, noble guests laugh faintly beside warm fires, entirely unaware of the fragile little battle unfolding below them. You realize then how servant life binds people together strangely. Not through comfort, not through fairness, through survival. Shared bread, shared labour, shared exhaustion beside smoky hearths while storms bury the roads outside. Later that night, Agnes finally speaks again while adding wood carefully to the fire. He wanted me to leave once. You glance toward her. The monk. He said the abbey laundries always needed workers. A faint smile touches her face briefly. Said I could sleep somewhere dry for once. Why didn't you go? Agnes stares into the flames. My mother got sick that winter. The answer explains everything and nothing simultaneously. No one can quite agree whether people remain in hard lives because they are trapped or because someone they love still needs them there. Often the two become impossible to separate. The fire crackles softly between you. Edith sleeps at last beneath layered blankets while Herb's steam drifts upward toward the rafters. Around the kitchen, servants settle quietly onto straw pallets and folded cloaks. Snow whispers against the roof overhead. And somewhere beyond the frozen fields, monastery bells mark another passing hour in the darkness, while the manor clings stubbornly to warmth, light, and one another against the endless winter night. Edith survives the worst of the sickness, though winter leaves her smaller somehow. By the third morning, her fever breaks enough for her to sit upright beside the hearth, wrapped in wool blankets like an irritated owl. The kitchen celebrates quietly by pretending not to notice Marjorie slipping extra honey into the morning broth. "Don't look at me like that," Marjorie mutters when Agnes raises an eyebrow. Dead herb women are difficult to replace. A touching declaration of affection, kitchen style. Outside, however, the snow deepens again. Roads vanish beneath white drifts. Cart travel slows nearly to nothing. Even the guards at the gatehouse stamp their boots constantly against the cold, while smoke from the chimneys drifts straight upward into pale winter skies. The abbey bells sound sharper now in the frozen air. Tonight, after dusk, the steward summons you unexpectedly near the great hall stairs. You'll carry a message. Your stomach sinks immediately. At night, remarkable observation. He presses a folded scrap of parchment sealed with wax into your hands. To the roadside shrine beyond the alder grove, a rider from the abbey waits there. You blink. Why not send a guard? The steward stares at you the way one might examine a cabbage that has spoken unexpectedly. Because the guards are busy, meaning because servants exist. Agnes appears beside you moments later, already fastening her cloak. "I'm going too." The steward hesitates, then shrugs. "Fine, but return quickly. Snow's worsening." And just like that, you find yourself stepping beyond the manor gates after dark while icy wind drives powdery snow across the road. The stable dog follows instantly. Naturally. The world outside feels transformed by winter night. Snow muffles every sound except distant bells drifting faintly through the darkness from the abbey beyond the hills. Trees stand black against the pale fields, while moonlight glows dimly through thick clouds overhead. Your lantern swings softly beside you. Agnes walks ahead with her hood drawn low. "Who's the message for you, whisper?" "No idea." "Helpful." Most manor errands aren't. The road crunches beneath frozen boots while breath clouds silver in the cold air. Somewhere far off, an owl calls once through the trees. You suddenly understand why medieval people invented so many ghost stories. Dark roads practically demand them. The alder grove appears slowly through drifting snow beside the riverbank. Bare branches creak softly overhead, while the little roadside shrine waits beneath its tilted roof dusted white with frost. A candle burns inside. Someone is already there. The rider stands beside a dark horse wrapped heavily in cloaks. Snow gathers across broad shoulders while lantern light flickers against leather gloves and travel boots crusted with ice. You stop several paces away instinctively. The stable dog growls low. The rider lowers the hood. Not a stranger. The lord's cousin. Agnes stiffens immediately beside you. "Well, that explains several things." He steps closer carefully. "You brought it." You hand over the sealed parchment while trying not to look visibly confused. The cousin breaks the wax quickly beside the shrine candle. His eyes scan the message once before exhaling sharply into the cold. "Good," Agnes finally speaks. "You're leaving." Not a question. The cousin glances toward her. "For a while." Snow drifts silently between all of you. No one can quite agree whether noble scandals grow larger because they matter more, or simply because rich people possess enough free time for complicated disasters. Whatever trouble surrounds the cousin clearly stretches beyond unpaid debts now. "The Abbey shelters travellers," Agnes says quietly. "It shelters many things." An unsettling answer. The cousin folds the parchment into his glove. "You should have gone when he offered." Agnes looks away toward the snowy trees. That was years ago. And still true. For one strange moment the road falls entirely silent except for wind moving through the branches overhead. Then the stable dog suddenly barks toward the darkness beyond the grove. Everyone startles. A shape moves briefly between the trees. You lift the lantern higher instinctively. Nothing there now. Probably. Peter once claimed winter spirits travel forest edges carrying stolen voices in sacks. Marjorie claimed Peter was an idiot, even now, alone beside the frozen road after dark. Certainty feels difficult. The cousin notices your expression. "Foxes," he says. "Large foxes." "No." Comforting. He pulls a small leather purse from beneath his cloak and presses it into Agnes's hands. She immediately tries refusing. "I can't." "You can." "I don't want charity." "It isn't charity." Snow catches in his hair while wind tugs at the horse reins beside him. Finally Agnes closes trembling fingers around the purse without another word. The cousin steps backward toward the waiting horse. "You never saw me here." A perfectly reasonable statement that guarantees the opposite. He mounts quickly afterward while the horse snorts steam into the freezing air. For a moment lantern light catches his face beneath the hood, tired, pale, uncertain. Then he turns toward the northern road, disappearing slowly into swirling snow beyond the trees. Gone. Just like that. The shrine feels smaller after he leaves. The candle flickers weakly beside the painted saint while snow gathers silently across the road. Agnes stands motionless, holding the little purse hidden inside her cloak. "You knew him well," you say gently. She laughs once without humour. "No." Another pause. "He was kind once." The answer carries more sadness than affection. Some swear kindness from nobles changes lives. Others insist it changes nothing because kindness still depends upon power, deciding whether to remain kind tomorrow. You begin walking back toward the manor through deepening snow. The stable dog trots ahead now, proudly carrying a stick larger than his own ambition should reasonably allow. The absurd sight breaks the silence slightly. "He'd survive the plague," Agnes murmurs. "He'd probably organise it." A faint smile finally touches her face. The manor lights glow dimly ahead through the storm while bells ring once more from the abbey beyond the hills. Snow thickens around you, soft and endless beneath the night sky. Halfway home, Agnes stops suddenly near the frozen river path. "When my mother got sick," she says quietly, "the cousin brought medicine from York." "You wait." She still died. The wind moves softly through the reeds beside the riverbank. Agnes stares toward the distant abbey lights barely visible through the snow. Afterward he told me I should leave the manor before it swallowed me too. Did he mean the work? I think he meant the forgetting. The words settle deeply inside the cold night. Because already you understand what she means. Days blur here beneath smoke and bells and endless labour. Years disappear quietly between winters. Servant girls become part of the walls, the kitchens, the corridors, necessary, invisible. Forgotten even while alive. By the time you return through the manor gates, your cloak is white with snow, and your fingers ache painfully from cold. Warmth rushes over you again as the kitchen doors open wide. Smoke, firelight, onion broth, wet wool steaming near the hearth. Edith asleep beneath blankets. Marjorie shouting about burnt oats. Life continuing exactly as before. And somewhere far beyond the snowy roads tonight, the Lord's cousin rides north beneath winter stars while the abbey bells echo faintly across the frozen dark. The storm passes at last, leaving behind a hard bright cold that sharpens every edge of the world. Snow crusts beneath your boots like broken pottery when you cross the courtyard before dawn. The sky above the manor glows pale blue behind the chimneys, while smoke rises straight upward into the frozen air. Somewhere in the stables, horses stamp impatiently against the cold, and the abbey bells carry farther than usual across the fields. Winter mornings after snowfall always feel strangely still, as though the world itself hesitates before beginning again. The manor does not hesitate. By sunrise, the steward already prowls the kitchens, jangling his iron keys like an omen. Supply cart leaves within the hour, he announces. The north wheel cracked yesterday. You'll help. Naturally, you glance toward Agnes, who looks equally thrilled by the news. Peter nearly drops a sack of oats onto his own foot. Roads are frozen solid. Excellent observation, the steward replies. Try not to become frozen solid yourselves. The supply cart waits near the gatehouse, half buried in frost. One wheel leans crookedly where the wood split near the rim, likely from too many overloaded journeys through muddy roads and winter ruts. Beside it stands a broad-shouldered cartwright wrapped in sheepskin, muttering darkly at the damage. "Cheap oak," he grumbles. Peter whispers, "Didn't the manor own the forest?" Exactly. A devastatingly efficient joke. The cartwright sends you gathering tools from the shed while Agnes helps unload grain sacks stacked too heavily across the rear axle. The stable dog circles everyone enthusiastically beneath the wagon, despite repeated threats involving stew pots. Morning sunlight slowly spreads across the snowy yard, turning frost silver along the walls. Guards warm hands over braziers near the gate while servants hurry between buildings carrying firewood and water buckets. The world feels awake again after days trapped beneath storms. You kneel beside the broken wheel, helping scrape packed mud and ice from the spokes. The wood smells damp and raw where it cracked. Nearby, the cartwright hammers iron bands back into shape beside a smoking forge pan. "Winter ruins wheels," he mutters. What doesn't winter ruin? He thinks about this carefully. Turnips, mostly. An entire season defeated by root vegetables. The repair work drags through the morning. Fingers numb, breath steaming white, iron tools freezing painfully against bare skin. Agnes wraps strips of cloth around her hands eventually just to keep splinters from biting deeper. Still, there is something calmer about working outdoors today. No smoky rafters overhead. No steward pacing nearby every moment. Only cold wind, bright snow, and the slow rhythm of practical labour. The cartwright speaks little, though occasionally he mutters old road superstitions while fitting the wheel rim back into place. Never whistle crossing frozen bridges. Peter immediately stops whistling. "Why?" Calls bad luck. "What kind?" The cartwright shrugs. "Bridge kind." Medieval explanations rarely waste unnecessary detail. By midday, the repaired wheel finally stands solid again. Everyone exhales with relief while the cartwright tests the axle twice more for safety. "You'll take supplies to the Abbey guest house before dusk," the steward announces suddenly. Peter groans openly this time. The steward ignores him. Bread, lamp oil, winter herbs. Agnes stiffens slightly beside the wagon. "You notice. The Abbey again. No one mentions the cousin. The road north cuts across frozen fields glittering beneath weak winter sunlight. Your cart creaks steadily over hardened ruts, while the horse exhales slow clouds of steam into the air. Snow crunches beneath the wheels with each turn. The stable dog trots proudly behind as though personally escorting the mission. Somewhere crows circle over distant bare trees. The countryside feels emptier after heavy snow. Villages hide behind shuttered windows. Smoke rises thinly from cottage roofs. Even travellers seem fewer now, swallowed by winter roads and common sense. Agnes rides beside the supplies wrapped tightly in her cloak. "You've been quiet." "I'm cold. A suspiciously emotional amount of cold." That finally earns a small smile. The road bends eventually toward the river crossing, where frost clings thickly to the wooden bridge rails. Water moves black beneath patches of drifting ice, while wind whistles softly through the reeds nearby. Peter immediately stops whistling again. You cross carefully. Halfway over, the repaired wheel gives a sudden sharp creak. Everyone freezes. The horse flicks its ears nervously. For one terrible heartbeat, the cart tilts slightly toward the river. Then stillness. Peter whispers a prayer so fast it sounds like bargaining. Agnes grips the cart rail hard enough for her knuckles to pale. Slowly, cautiously, you continue. The wheel survives. Barely. No one speaks again until the abbey walls finally appear through the winter trees beyond the hilltop. Stone rises grey against the snow-covered landscape tall bell tower. Narrow windows. Smoke curling gently from the kitchens and guest-house chimneys. The sound of chanting drifts faintly across the frozen air, while bells toll the afternoon hour. The abbey feels quieter than the manor somehow. Not peaceful exactly. Ordered. The guest-house brother greets you beside the courtyard gate carrying an armful of split wood. "You're late." "We nearly died on a bridge," Peter says immediately. The monk nods thoughtfully. "Yes, winter roads do that." A refreshingly calm response to mortal danger. Inside the guest house, warmth wraps around you at once. Not luxurious warmth like noble chambers. Simpler warmth, clean straw, fresh bread, thick soup simmering gently near the hearth. You suddenly understand why travellers speak fondly of monasteries despite the prayers and terrifying schedules. Ink-stained scribes move quietly through nearby corridors carrying bundles of parchment, while younger novices sweep snow from the cloisters outside. Candles flicker against whitewashed walls smelling faintly of beeswax and old books. The monk from the manor kitchen appears soon after. His expression softens slightly, seeing Agnes. "You made it safely." "Mostly," Peter mutters darkly. The monk studies the repaired wheel outside through the doorway. "That cart won't survive another hard freeze." Encouraging. No one can quite agree whether optimism or ale keeps England functioning during winter, he replies calmly. Fair enough, honestly. While the supplies unload, you warm your hands beside the guest-house hearth sipping thin onion broth offered by the brothers. The stable dog lies directly in front of the fire, now achieving spiritual enlightenment through heat. Agnes wanders briefly toward the cloister garden visible beneath snow through an archway. The monk joins her quietly. You do not hear their conversation. Only fragments drifting back later through the cold air. Still time. Or can't leave them. You deserve. Then silence again. By dusk, the cart reloads for the journey home beneath a sky already turning violet over the snowy hills. Bells echo softly through the abbey courtyard while candlelight glows behind narrow windows. As you prepare to leave, the monk presses a small cloth bundle into Agnes's hands. For Edith's breathing, she nods once. Nothing more. The road home darkens quickly afterward beneath gathering stars and frozen air sharp enough to sting your lungs. The repaired wheel creaks steadily, but holds. For now, and as the manor lights slowly reappear ahead across the snowy fields, you begin to sense how fragile every part of this world truly is. Wheels crack, roads vanish, people leave, winter lingers, yet somehow the bells continue ringing, the fires continue burning, and servant girls continue carrying warmth through the darkness one long day at a time. The abbey herbs help Edith breathe more easily. Within days she resumes sitting upright beside the kitchen hearth again, muttering complaints about lazy apprentices and damp firewood with renewed strength. Everyone pretends not to notice the relief spreading quietly through the servants' hall. Even Marjorie softens enough to place extra bread near Edith's bowl one evening, a miracle greater than several saints combined. Winter deepens meanwhile. The snow no longer falls constantly, but the cold hardens instead into something steadier, older, as though the land itself has settled into endurance. Frost flowers bloom across the narrow windows every morning. Water buckets ice over by dawn. Servants sleep pressed closer together beside the hearth simply to keep warmth from escaping into the rafters. And yet life continues. Always. You rise before sunrise. Carry wood. Scrub pots. Sweep brushes. Turn spits. The bells ring. The fires burn. The steward complains. Somewhere beyond the walls crows cross pale skies above frozen fields. The rhythm of the manor seeps slowly into your bones. Perhaps that is what Agnes meant by forgetting. Still, something has changed in her since the abbey journey. Not dramatically, only little things. She pauses sometimes while working, listening toward the distant bells drifting across the snow. She folds her blankets more carefully now. Once you catch her staring thoughtfully at the manor gates during dawn chores while frost smokes from her breath. And one evening she finally speaks. It happens while the two of you carry fresh rushes into the great hall after supper. Most of the household already sleeps. Candles burn low along the walls while shadows sway gently across the banners overhead. The hall feels enormous when empty. Only the crackle of dying embers breaks the silence. Agnes kneels beside the hearth, spreading clean rushes carefully over the worn stone floor. He asked again, "You stop beside the long table?" "The monk." She nods faintly. "To come to the abbey." And Agnes smooths another handful of rushes slowly beneath her hands. "I don't know any more." The answer lingers between you while wind murmurs softly outside the shutters. No one can quite agree whether monasteries offer freedom or merely another kind of duty. Servants scrub floors there too. Bells still wake you before dawn. Winter still arrives cold and merciless across the countryside. Yet perhaps walls built for prayer feel different from walls built for hierarchy. Perhaps being seen matters. The stable dog wanders sleepily through the hall, carrying what appears to be half a turnip stolen from somewhere deeply important. Agnes watches him fondly. He'd hate monastery life. He'd steal communion bread. He'd become a saint somehow. Honestly, possible. You finish spreading the rushes while candlelight flickers low across the empty tables. Somewhere above stairs, noble footsteps cross distant corridors. Somewhere below. Peter snores loudly enough to concern structural engineers centuries before their invention. The manor rests uneasily around you. Then the bells begin. Not the abbey bells. The gate bell. Sharp. Urgent. Both of you freeze. Again the bell rings through the night. Voices echo suddenly outside. Boots strike stone in the courtyard. The stable dog barks furiously and bolts toward the doors. Agnes rises instantly. What happened? You hurry together toward the entrance passage where servants already gather half awake beneath flickering torchlight. Snow swirls through the opened gate tunnel beyond. A cart has arrived. or what remains of one. The wagon leans broken sideways near the courtyard well while two exhausted travellers struggle beside an injured horse trembling in the cold. One wheel lies shattered completely beneath packed snow. The repaired Abbey wheel. Peter appears beside you, pale with horror. I told them. The steward storms into the yard, fastening his cloak angrily. What is this? The driver bows shakily. Axle snapped near the river crossing, master, as we nearly lost the cart entirely. The steward mutters words probably unfit for church walls. Servants rush forward carrying lanterns while snow whips across the courtyard. The injured horse shivers violently, steam rising from its flanks. Without hesitation, Agnes grabs blankets from a nearby barrel. She snaps toward Peter. Kitchen coals. Hurry. For a moment, everyone simply obeys her. Even the steward. You help guide the horse toward the stable, while the cart driver stumbles through explanations about ice, darkness, and collapsing road edges near the bridge. The stable dog circles the entire disaster ecstatically, convinced this counts as entertainment. Inside the stable, warmth hits slowly hay, lantern smoke, animal breath. Grooms rub the horse dry with rough cloths while Peter arrives carrying heated stones wrapped in sacks. Move, Agnes orders gently but firmly. You watch her then. Really watch her. The quick hands, the calm voice, the certainty. This exhausted servant girl who spent years believing herself invisible now moves through the chaos like someone suddenly remembering she exists. The horse survives the night. Barely. The cart does not. By midnight, the broken wagon rests dismantled beside the sheds while snow piles steadily over its ruined axle. The steward fumes privately about costs and delays. The travellers sleep near the kitchens wrapped in borrowed blankets. And the manor slowly quiets once more. Later, after everyone settles again, you find Agnes standing alone beneath the gate arch looking outward toward the snowy road beyond the walls. Moonlight silvers the drifts around her boots. The distant abbey bells drift softly through the frozen dark. You're leaving, you say quietly. She does not answer immediately. At last. Maybe. The word hangs pale as breath between you. What changed? Agnes smiles faintly without looking away from the road. Nothing changed. A pause. I just remembered there are roads. Beyond the gates, the winter landscape stretches silent beneath moonlight fields, forests, bridges, shrines, distant villages buried in frost, dangerous roads, lonely roads, roads where carts break and storms rise and travellers vanish into snow. But still roads. Some swear fate binds people to the place they are born. Others insist every road eventually opens if someone grows brave enough to walk it. Even now, standing beneath the old manor gate while frost glitters across the sleeping world, it is impossible to know which is true. The stable dog eventually trots out beside you, both carrying stolen sausage triumphantly through the snow. Agnes laughs softly at last. You know, she murmurs, he really would survive anywhere. You glance once more toward the distant abbey lights flickering faintly beyond the frozen fields. And for the first time since arriving at the manor, you begin to imagine that perhaps servant girls might survive elsewhere too. Winter loosens slowly, almost reluctantly. The snow remains longest in the shadows beside the manor walls and beneath the bare alder trees near the riverbank, but little changes begin appearing day by day. Water drips steadily from the eaves at noon. Mud returns to the courtyard in narrow brown ribbons. Crows grow louder in the mornings. Somewhere beneath the frozen fields, the earth prepares itself quietly for spring. Inside the manor, however, the old rhythms continue unchanged. Before dawn the bells still ring. The hearth still smokes. The steward still complains about absolutely everything capable of existing, and servant girls still rise from rough blankets with cold hands and tired bones to begin another day. Yet now, after so many winter weeks, you move through the manor differently. You know where the floor stones crack beneath worn rushes. You know which kitchen shelves hide the better bread crusts. You know the exact moment before Marjorie loses patience entirely, and the precise route the stable dog takes when attempting sausage theft. The manor no longer feels strange. That realization unsettles you more than anything else. Because this is how forgetting begins. Not suddenly. Quietly. One dawn becoming another until the years blur together beneath smoke and candlelight. Agnes says little these days about the Abbey, though sometimes you still catch her listening toward the distant bells drifting across the fields at dusk. The little leather purse from the cousin remains hidden carefully among her blankets untouched. Perhaps some decisions require winter to finish speaking before answers arrive. The Lord's cousin never returns. Rumours do, of course. Rumours always travel faster than carts. Some servants whisper he joined merchants heading north toward the coast. Others swear the Abbey sheltered him secretly from creditors or enemies or both. Peter insists he became a wandering pilgrim after losing everything in a card game involving bishops and French wine. Peter's stories improve dramatically whenever facts disappear. No one can quite agree what truly happened. And eventually, like most things here, the uncertainty simply becomes part of the manor itself. One evening near the end of winter, the household gathers quietly in the great hall after supper while rain taps softly against the shutters for the first time in weeks. Not snow now. Rain. Warm enough to smell of thawing earth. Candles flicker low along the tables while servants mend clothes, sharpen knives, patch baskets, and speak in tired voices softened by the late hour. The hall feels smaller tonight somehow, gentler. Edith sits beside the hearth, threading herbs into little hanging bundles once more. For spring sickness, she explains. Spring has sickness too, Peter asks miserably. Spring has mud, Marjorie replies. Mud becomes sickness eventually. A surprisingly comprehensive medieval medical philosophy. The stable dog sleeps belly up beside the fire in complete trust toward the universe. Outside the rain murmurs steadily across the courtyard stones, while somewhere distant the Abbey bells ring through mist and darkness. Agnes stands slowly. Everyone glances toward her. Even the steward pauses, counting keys near the doorway. I'm leaving at dawn, she says simply. Silence follows. Not shocked silence, exactly. More the silence of hearing something everyone already suspected spoken aloud at last. Marjorie sniffs once. Abbey? Agnes nods. They need laundry workers. Peter looks unexpectedly stricken. But who'll stop me from ruining everything? You'll manage alone somehow. Edith reaches into her basket then and presses a little herb charm into Agnes's hands, tied carefully with faded blue ribbon. For luck. Agnes swallows hard before accepting it. No speeches follow. No grand blessings. This is a manor, after all, not a ballad. Still, the mood around the hearth changes quietly afterward. Conversations soften. People linger longer beside the fire. Even the steward pretends not to notice the extra bread Marjorie slices for everyone before sleep. Later, long after the others settle onto blankets and straw pallets, you sit awake beside the fading embers with Agnes while rain drifts softly through the darkness outside. You're afraid, you say gently. Yes. Good sign, probably. She laughs quietly. I don't even know what waits there. Warm floors, maybe? Luxury. The stable dog lifts one ear sleepily at the sound of voices before settling again nearer the hearth. Agnes watches the flames for a long moment. When I first came here, she says softly, I thought surviving meant becoming harder. The embers shift gently red beneath ash. But it isn't that. What is it? She thinks a while before answering. Remembering yourself anyway. The hall grows very still around you then. Candles burn low. Rain whispers against stone. Somewhere upstairs the noble household sleeps behind oak doors and thick curtains, unaware of the small farewell unfolding below stairs beside the kitchen, smoke and dying firelight. And slowly, as the night deepens around the old manor, the world begins softening too. The wind loses its sharp winter edge. The rafters creak gently overhead. The smell of wet earth drifts faintly through the cracks near the shutters where spring waits patiently beyond the dark fields. At dawn, Agnes leaves quietly. No ceremony. Only mist rising pale above the road while servants stand sleep-heavy beneath the gate arch, clutching cloaks against the cold morning rain. The monk waits beside a little abbey cart loaded with linens and flour sacks. Agnes hugs Edith carefully first. Then Peter, then even Marjorie, who mutters something angry about onions while wiping suspiciously damp eyes on her apron. Finally she turns toward you. "You'll be all right," she says. An odd thing for someone leaving to say. Before you answer, the stable dog trots forward proudly carrying half a loaf stolen from somewhere miraculous. Agnes bursts into tired laughter one last time. "There," she says, "he already planned breakfast." The abbey cart creaks away soon after into the grey morning mist. Bells drift faintly across the wet fields. Agnes does not look back again, and gradually the road swallows her. The manor remains behind you exactly as before, smoke rising from chimneys, muddy carts in the yard, servants hurrying toward another day beneath the bells. Yet something feels lighter now, as though one small part of the world has shifted quietly out of place. The rain continues softly through the morning while you return toward the kitchens beside the stable dog and the familiar warmth waiting below stairs. The hearth glows red. Bread bakes somewhere nearby. Voices murmur gently in the smoky half-light. And beyond the manor walls, beyond the frozen roads and distant abbey bells, the medieval world stretches onward into mist, memory, and softening rain, until even the old stones seem ready at last to rest.